At 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, Sarah Mitchell bought a billboard that would destroy her entire life. She thought she was exposing her cheating fiancé. Instead, she was walking straight into a trap that had been set for months. What started as a simple revenge plot became a nightmare of manipulation so twisted, it would make you question everything you think you know about love, trust, and sanity itself. Sarah discovered that her fiancé wasn't just cheating, he was running a sophisticated con that had already destroyed multiple women and their children. This is the true story of how one woman's quest for justice turned into a fight for her daughter's future, her own sanity, and ultimately, her survival. By the end, you'll understand why sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who claims to love you most. If you've ever doubted your own instincts in a relationship, this story will hit you like a freight train. Hit that like button if you're ready for a wild ride, drop a comment if you've ever felt gaslit by someone you trusted, and subscribe because stories like this, real, raw, and devastating, are exactly what we dive into on this channel. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of what happens next. Sarah Mitchell was folding laundry in her small Austin apartment when her phone buzzed. 8-year-old Emma was at her dad's for the weekend, and Derek had promised to call after his morning run. Instead, she found a text from her best friend Jessica with 3 words that changed everything. Check Instagram now. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the app. There it was. Amber Rodriguez, Derek's 26-year-old secretary, had posted a cozy breakfast photo. 2 coffee mugs sat on a familiar wooden table. Sarah recognized every detail. The blue ceramic mug with the chip on the handle, the cream-colored throw blanket she'd bought at Target last month, her own kitchen counter. The caption made her stomach drop. Sunday mornings hit different when you're with the right person. A heart emoji, posted 30 minutes ago. Sarah stared at the screen until the image blurred. Derek Thompson, her fiancé of 6 months, was supposed to be at his own apartment across town. He'd kissed her goodbye Friday evening, promising a quiet weekend to prep for next week's real estate conference. She scrolled through Amber's other recent posts, pool photos at what looked like Derek's condo complex, a dinner plate at Romano's, the restaurant where Derek had proposed, a close-up shot of manicured nails holding car keys with a BMW keychain. Derek drove a BMW. The evidence was overwhelming, yet Sarah found herself making excuses. Maybe Derek had asked Amber to house sit. Maybe she was watering plants. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation. But deep down, Sarah knew. The late nights at the office, the password-protected phone that used to stay unlocked. The way Derek deflected questions about his secretary's obvious flirting during office parties. Sarah had been here before. Her ex-husband Michael had cheated throughout their marriage, leaving her questioning her own instincts. When she'd finally filed for divorce, he'd made her feel crazy for months before she found the proof. Now, 3 years later, she'd thought she'd found safety with Derek. He paid for Emma's private school tuition, something Sarah's marketing manager salary couldn't cover. He took them on weekend trips to Houston and Dallas. Emma adored him, calling him almost Daddy Derek. The engagement ring caught the morning light as Sarah set down her phone. 3 months from now, she was supposed to become Mrs. Derek Thompson. The invitations had been sent. The venue was booked. Emma had picked out her flower girl dress. Sarah walked to her kitchen window and looked out at the parking lot. Derek's BMW wasn't there, but she hadn't expected it to be. He'd claimed he needed space to prepare for his presentation. Instead, he was apparently having breakfast with his secretary in Sarah's apartment. The betrayal felt different this time. With Michael, she'd been young and naive. With Derek, she'd been careful. She'd waited a full year before introducing him to Emma. She'd insisted on a long engagement. She'd thought she'd learned from her mistakes. Her phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, beautiful." His voice was warm and familiar. "Just finished my run. How's your morning going?" Sarah stared at Amber's Instagram post. The timestamp showed it was posted while Derek was supposedly running. "Fine," she managed. "How was your run?" "Great. Cleared my head for the presentation tomorrow. Listen, I might be busy most of today prepping. Rain check on dinner." Sarah closed her eyes. Even now, he was lying. "Of course," she said. "Good luck with prep." After hanging up, Sarah sat on her couch and tried to process what she'd discovered. The smart thing would be to confront Derek directly, demand an explanation, give him a chance to come clean. But Sarah had tried that approach with Michael. She'd been reasonable and trusting, only to discover later that he'd used her directness to cover his tracks better. This time would be different. This time, she would be strategic. Sarah opened her laptop and began researching local billboard companies. As a marketing professional, she knew exactly how to make a statement that would be impossible to ignore. Derek thought he could manipulate her like he had before. He was about to learn that Sarah Mitchell wasn't the same broken woman who'd let Michael gaslight her for years. This time, she was going to fight back. Monday morning arrived with Derek's usual text, "Good morning, gorgeous. Can't wait to see you tonight." Sarah stared at the message, knowing he'd probably sent it while lying next to Amber. She dropped Emma off at school, forcing a smile as her daughter chattered about the upcoming wedding. "Is Derek gonna be my real daddy after you get married?" Emma asked, adjusting her backpack. "We'll always be a family," Sarah replied, her heart breaking. She'd been so careful not to rush things, but Emma had already attached herself to Derek completely. At work, Sarah struggled to focus on her client presentations. Her marketing firm specialized in local advertising campaigns, and she knew every billboard owner in Austin. More importantly, she knew their rates and availability. During lunch, she called Southwest Outdoor Advertising. "This is Sarah Mitchell from Creative Solutions. I need a digital billboard slot for a personal project." "Hey, Sarah," came the familiar voice of Tony Castellanos, their account manager. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "Wednesday through Friday. Prime location if you have it. I-35 and Riverside. That's our highest traffic spot." "Perfect. I'll need the Wednesday morning slot specifically." Tony quoted the price. $3,000 for 3 days. Nearly Sarah's entire emergency fund, but she'd been saving for months to contribute to the wedding expenses. Now those savings would serve a different purpose. That evening, Derek arrived at Sarah's apartment with flowers and takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. "You seem distracted," he said, studying her face as they ate. "Everything okay?" Sarah had practiced this moment. Just wedding stress. 3 months feels like no time at all. Derek reached across the table and took her hand. "Hey, we can always postpone if you're feeling overwhelmed." "No," Sarah said quickly. "I want to marry you." The lie came easily. She needed him to believe nothing had changed. After dinner, Derek helped Emma with homework while Sarah cleaned up. Watching them together had once filled her with joy. Now it felt like watching a performance. "Mommy, can Derek read me a story?" Emma asked, already in her pajamas. "Of course, sweetheart." Sarah listened from the kitchen as Derek's voice carried down the hallway, reading Emma's favorite book about a princess who saved herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. When Derek returned to the living room, he pulled Sarah into his arms. "I love our little family," he whispered against her hair. Sarah forced herself not to pull away. "Me too." After Derek left, Sarah opened her laptop and got to work. She'd spent the day gathering evidence. Screenshots of Amber's Instagram posts with timestamps. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants where Derek claimed to be working late. Phone records revealing calls to Amber's number at odd hours. But Sarah's plan wasn't about evidence. It was about exposure. She opened Photoshop and began designing her billboard. The image was simple Amber's breakfast photo, enlarged and high resolution. The text was even simpler, "He's engaged," in bold white letters across the bottom. No names. No accusations that could be considered defamatory. Just a statement of fact over a photo Amber had posted publicly. Sarah scheduled the design to go live Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Rush hour traffic would ensure maximum visibility. She chose Wednesday because Derek had mentioned a client breakfast downtown. He'd drive right past the billboard. As she finalized the payment, Sarah felt a moment of doubt. This would change everything. There would be no taking it back. But then she remembered Emma's excited face talking about Derek becoming her real daddy. She thought about the wedding dress hanging in her closet, bought with money she'd saved by skipping lunches for months. She considered all the nights she'd apologized for being paranoid when her instinct screamed that something was wrong. Derek had made his choice. Now Sarah was making hers. Tuesday passed in a blur of normal routine. Derek texted throughout the day, maintaining his usual charm. Sarah responded appropriately, playing the role of the trusting fiancé. That evening, she put Emma to bed early and sat on her couch with a glass of wine. In 12 hours, her billboard would go live. Derek's perfect double life would be exposed to thousands of commuters. Sarah had no idea that Derek's retaliation would be swift, calculated, and far more devastating than anything she could imagine. The last text Derek sent that night read, "Sweet dreams, beautiful. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." He had no idea how right he was. Wednesday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Sarah sat in her car at a gas station with a clear view of the I-35 and Riverside billboard. Her coffee grew cold as she watched the digital display cycle through advertisements. At exactly 7:02, her image appeared. Amber's cozy breakfast photo filled the massive screen in high definition. Below it, in stark white letters, "He's engaged." Sarah's heart pounded as commuters began to notice. Some drivers slowed down. A few pulled out phones. Within minutes, Sarah's phone was buzzing with notifications. The first call came from Jessica. "Holy shit! Sarah, did you actually do it?" "It's live," Sarah whispered, watching a woman in an SUV take a photo of the billboard. "This is either brilliant or completely insane." Before Sarah could respond, her phone lit up with an incoming call. "Derek." "I have to go," she told Jessica. Sarah declined Derek's call and drove to work, taking surface streets to avoid the billboard. She needed to be somewhere public when Derek confronted her. She made it through exactly 47 minutes of normal workday routine before Derek stormed into her office building. "Sarah," his voice carried across the reception area. "We need to talk, now." Her coworkers stared as Derek approached her desk. His face was red, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Not here," Sarah said calmly. "Conference room." Once they were alone, Derek exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you? That billboard? Are you completely out of your mind?" Sarah had prepared for this moment, but Derek's fury was more intense than she'd expected. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Don't play dumb. Amber's picture is on a fucking billboard with our personal business displayed for the entire city." "Our personal business?" Sarah stood up. "Derek, that's Amber's Instagram post. She put it out there, not me. You know exactly what this looks like. You're making us both seem like we're having an affair." Sarah noticed Derek's choice of words, not denying the affair, just objecting to how it looked. "Are you?" she asked quietly. Derek's expression shifted. The anger faded, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Sarah, honey, I'm worried about you. This kind of behavior, it's not normal. You're seeing things that aren't there. The gaslighting was immediate and practiced. Sarah recognized it from her marriage to Michael. I'm seeing Amber's public Instagram posts, Sarah said. Posts from my apartment while you claim to be at yours. Derek moved closer, his voice becoming gentle. Sweetie, I asked Amber to check on your place while we were both out of town. Remember, you said your downstairs neighbor mentioned a water leak in the building. I sent her over to make sure everything was okay. Sarah blinked. She didn't remember mentioning any water leak. I never said anything about a leak. You did, baby. Friday morning before I left. You were stressed about leaving Emma at Michael's and worrying about the apartment. I was just trying to help. Derek's tone was so reasonable, so caring. For a moment, Sarah almost believed him. I can show you the Ring doorbell footage, Derek continued. Me asking Amber to check on things. The building management request for access. This is all a misunderstanding. Sarah felt her certainty wavering. Had she mentioned a water leak, she'd been distracted Friday morning, worried about Emma's weekend with Michael. The breakfast photo, she said weakly. Amber probably grabbed coffee before checking the apartment. She likes to document everything on social media. You know how these young women are. Derek stepped closer, taking Sarah's hands. I'm not mad about the billboard, he said softly. I'm concerned. This level of paranoia, the jumping to conclusions. It reminds me of what you went through with Michael. Maybe you should talk to someone. The suggestion hit like a physical blow. Sarah had spent 2 years in therapy after her divorce, working through the trauma of Michael's gaslighting and infidelity. I'm not being paranoid, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Of course not, Derek agreed quickly. But stress can make us see patterns that aren't there. The wedding planning, Emma's adjustment, work pressure. Maybe we should postpone the wedding until you're feeling more stable. More stable, Sarah's voice cracked. I love you, Derek said, cupping her face. But I'm worried you're having another breakdown, like after the divorce. The words landed exactly where Derek intended. Sarah's biggest fear was repeating the mistakes of her marriage to Michael. Derek was suggesting she was doing exactly that. I need to think, Sarah said. Of course, take all the time you need. But Sarah, you need to take down that billboard. It's hurting both of us. After Derek left, Sarah sat alone in the conference room, questioning everything. Had she misinterpreted innocent interactions? Was her history with Michael making her paranoid by afternoon? The billboard had generated local news coverage. Mystery billboard exposes alleged affair ran on 3 different stations. Social media was buzzing with speculation about the identity of the people involved. Sarah called the billboard company and had the image removed. The exposure she'd planned had lasted exactly 8 hours. That evening, Derek arrived at her apartment with Emma's favorite pizza and a bouquet of white roses. I talked to my therapist today, he announced. About us. About how to support you through this difficult time. Emma hugged Derek tightly, oblivious to the tension. I love you both so much, Derek said, looking directly at Sarah. We're going to get through this together. As Sarah watched Derek help Emma with her homework, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe she was seeing problems where none existed. The billboard was down, but Sarah's doubts about her own judgment were just beginning. Thursday morning brought Derek's proof. He arrived at Sarah's apartment with his iPad, ready to vindicate himself completely. I hate that we're going through this, he said, settling next to Sarah on the couch. But I want you to see everything so we can move past it. Derek opened his Ring app and scrolled to Friday's footage. There it was, Derek speaking to Amber in his building's lobby at 11 a.m. "Can you check on Sarah's apartment today?" His voice was clear on the recording. "She's worried about a water leak in her building." "Of course," Amber replied. "I'll grab the spare key." Sarah watched, stunned. Derek had mentioned her supposed concern so casually, so naturally. "Here's the building management email," Derek continued, showing his phone. A message from Riverside Gardens management thanked Derek for reporting a potential leak and confirmed they'd granted access for inspection. "I don't remember mentioning any leak," Sarah said weakly. Derek's expression was patient, concerned. "Honey, you were stressed about Emma's weekend with Michael. You mentioned it while making coffee. Said Mrs. Henderson downstairs had seen water stains." The detail was so specific. Sarah tried to remember Friday morning, but it was a blur of rushing to get Emma ready and herself to work. "Let me call Mrs. Henderson," Sarah said. "She's visiting her daughter in Dallas this week," Derek replied immediately. "But she'll be back Monday if you want to check." Every answer Derek provided seemed reasonable. The documentation looked authentic. Sarah began to feel genuinely confused about her own memories. "I overreacted," she said finally. Derek pulled her close. "You're dealing with trauma from Michael. It's understandable, but I need you to trust me. Sarah, we can't build a marriage without trust." That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Tony at the billboard company. "Hey, I wanted to give you a heads up," Tony said. "We've had some inquiries about yesterday's ad, news stations asking about the client. I didn't give any information, but there's definitely interest." "Thanks for the discretion," Sarah said. "No problem. Though I have to ask, is everything okay?" That was a pretty intense message. Sarah realized how her billboard must have looked to outsiders. A scorned woman making public accusations without proof. "It's complicated," she said. "Well, if you need to run any follow-up ads, let me know. Though maybe something a little less dramatic next time." After work, Sarah picked up Emma from school. Her daughter was unusually quiet during the drive home. "Mommy, is Derek still going to marry us?" Emma asked as they pulled into their parking lot. "Why would you ask that?" "Sweetie, Daddy Michael said Derek might not want to be my stepdad anymore." Sarah's blood froze. "When did Daddy Michael say that?" "He called me last night. Said Derek saw something on the news about our family and might change his mind about wanting me." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Michael had been largely absent from Emma's life since the divorce, but he had a talent for inserting himself during vulnerable moments. "Derek loves you very much," Sarah said. "Don't worry about what Daddy Michael says." But privately, Sarah wondered if Derek had contacted Michael. The timing seemed too convenient. That evening, Derek arrived for dinner with Chinese takeout and news. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said as they ate. "Maybe we should move the wedding up. Show everyone that we're stronger than gossip." "Move it up?" Sarah was surprised. "Next month instead of 3 months from now, we can have a simple ceremony, just close family. The important thing is that we're committed to each other." Emma bounced in her chair. "A wedding next month. Can I still wear my pink dress?" "Of course, princess," Derek said, ruffling her hair. Sarah found herself swept along by Derek's enthusiasm and Emma's excitement. A quick, simple wedding would avoid months of speculation about their relationship. "Okay," she agreed. "Let's do it." Derek's smile was brilliant. "Perfect. I'll call the vendors tomorrow and see what we can arrange." After Emma went to bed, Derek suggested watching a movie. As they cuddled on the couch, Sarah felt her earlier doubts fading. "I'm sorry about the billboard," she said. I let my past with Michael make me paranoid. You don't need to apologize, Derek said. But I do think you should consider counseling again. Not because anything's wrong with you, but because our marriage deserves to start on solid ground. The suggestion stung, but Derek's tone was loving. Maybe he was right. Maybe she did need help processing her trust issues. I'll look into it, Sarah said. Good. And Sarah. No more social media detective work. Okay. If you have concerns, come to me directly. Sarah nodded, feeling chastened but also relieved. Derek was handling her breakdown with more grace than she deserved. As Derek left that night, he kissed her forehead. I love you, even when you're struggling. We're going to be okay. Sarah went to bed feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe the billboard incident had been a wake-up call she needed. Maybe Derek's quick forgiveness was proof of his commitment. She had no idea that Derek had spent the day setting up the next phase of his plan, one that would make her billboard stunt look like child's play. The Ring doorbell footage was real, but Derek had created the water leak concern himself, planting the story in Sarah's mind during a conversation she barely remembered. Everything else was about to unravel. 3 weeks into wedding planning, Sarah was feeling optimistic about her future. The ceremony was set for the following Saturday at a small venue outside Austin. Emma's dress had been altered. Derek had arranged for a photographer and a string quartet, but Jessica Chen remained skeptical. This whole rush to the altar feels wrong, Jessica said during their Friday lunch. First he wants you in therapy, now he wants you married ASAP. He wants to prove we're solid after the billboard incident, Sarah replied. I don't blame him. Have you noticed that every time you question something, Derek has a perfectly reasonable explanation? Sarah set down her salad fork. So you want me to be suspicious of everything that's exhausting? Jess, I want you to trust your instincts, the same instincts that told you something was wrong in the first place. Jessica leaned forward. I hired someone. You what? A private investigator. Tom Brennan. He's discreet and thorough. I had him look into Derek's recent activities. Sarah felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Jessica, you can't just investigate my fiancé. I can, and I did. And Sarah, you need to see what he found. Jessica slid a manila envelope across the table. Look at this when you're ready, but don't wait too long. Your wedding is in 7 days. That evening, Sarah stared at the envelope for hours. Derek was at his bachelor party, a quiet dinner with his business partners. Emma was sleeping peacefully, excited about being a flower girl. Finally, at 11 p.m., Sarah opened the envelope. The first page was a timeline of Derek's activities over the past month. Detailed, photographed, documented. Friday, September 15th. Derek's car at Amber's apartment complex, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sunday, September 17th. Derek and Amber entering the Driscoll Hotel together, 2 p.m. checkout. Tuesday, September 19th. Amber leaving Derek's office building at midnight, carrying an overnight bag. The photographs were clear and damning. Derek loading luggage into his car with Amber. Derek and Amber holding hands in a restaurant Sarah didn't recognize. Derek kissing Amber in the parking lot of a downtown office building. But the most devastating evidence came on page 4. A bank statement showing Derek had paid for Amber's apartment lease, not just this month, but for the past 6 months. Since before he'd proposed to Sarah, the final page was a photocopy of a lease agreement. The apartment Amber was photographed leaving was leased under Derek Thompson's name. Amber Rodriguez was listed as an authorized resident. Sarah's hands shook as she read the dates. Derek had been financially supporting Amber since March. He'd proposed to Sarah in April. Everything had been a lie. The Ring doorbell footage, the water leak story, the concerned fiancé act. Derek hadn't been protecting Sarah from her paranoia. He'd been gaslighting her into questioning her own perceptions. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Missing you tonight. Can't wait to marry you next week." She stared at the message, then at the photographs of Derek with his arms around another woman. Sarah called Jessica. "You saw it," Jessica said immediately. "He's been living with her, paying her rent, this whole time." "The investigator says this is Derek's pattern. He finds women with kids, plays the devoted stepdad, then gradually isolates them while maintaining other relationships." Other relationships, plural. "There's a woman in Dallas, divorced, 2 kids, been seeing Derek for 8 months. She thinks they're exclusive too." Sarah sank onto her couch. What kind of person does this? A sociopath? Someone who enjoys the power and control? Sarah looked around her apartment, thinking of all the ways Derek had inserted himself into her life. Emma's school tuition, which created financial dependency, the rushed wedding, which would have legal implications, the therapy suggestions, which undermined her confidence. "I have to confront him," Sarah said, "with backup, and Sarah document everything. If Derek is this calculating, he'll have a counter strategy." Sarah spent the weekend preparing. She made copies of all the investigators' evidence. She researched Derek's business finances and discovered irregularities that suggested he was using client escrow accounts to fund his multiple relationships. Monday morning, Sarah requested a meeting with Derek at his office. She told him she wanted to discuss honeymoon plans. Derek greeted her with coffee and croissants from her favorite bakery. "1 week from today, you'll be Mrs. Thompson," he said, kissing her cheek. Sarah placed the manila envelope on his desk. Derek's expression didn't change as he opened it, but his body went very still. "Where did you get this?" he asked calmly. "Does it matter?" Derek flipped through the photographs slowly, his face betraying nothing. "I can explain everything," he said finally. "I'm listening." Amber was in an abusive relationship. I was helping her get back on her feet. The apartment, the financial support, it was temporary assistance for a vulnerable employee. And the kissing, the hotel rooms. Derek leaned back in his chair. "Those pictures are taken out of context. Amber was having panic attacks about her ex-boyfriend. I was providing emotional support." Sarah marveled at Derek's calm delivery, even caught red-handed. He was spinning a narrative. "What about the woman in Dallas?" For the first time, Derek looked surprised. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Jennifer Martinez, 2 kids, divorced, been seeing you for 8 months. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You really went all out with this investigation, didn't you?" The mask was finally dropping. "It's over, Derek!" Derek's smile widened. "Is it because I think you're forgetting something important?" "What's that?" Derek opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Evidence of your mental instability. The billboard incident was just the beginning. I've been documenting your erratic behavior for months." Sarah's blood turned cold. "Emma's a very impressionable child," Derek continued, "and her father is concerned about the unstable environment you're creating. Michael and I have had several conversations about what's best for Emma." The threat was crystal clear. Derek had been building a case against Sarah's fitness as a mother. "You bastard," Sarah whispered. "I prefer strategic," Derek said. "Now, we can handle this 2 ways. You can accept that you imagined this whole affair, get the help you clearly need, and we can have a lovely wedding next Saturday. Or you can push this investigation, and I'll be forced to take legal action to protect Emma from your declining mental state." Sarah stared at the man she'd almost married, seeing him clearly for the first time. Derek wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who'd spent months systematically destroying her confidence and credibility, setting up a scenario where he held all the power, but Sarah was done being powerless. "I'll be in touch," she said, standing to leave. "I hope you make the right choice," Derek called after her, "for Emma's sake." As Sarah walked to her car, she realized Derek had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how much she was willing to sacrifice to protect her daughter. Sarah spent Tuesday through Thursday in careful preparation. She canceled nothing. The wedding venue, the photographer, the string quartet. To the outside world, everything appeared normal. But Sarah was building her own case. Jessica connected her with an attorney who specialized in custody disputes and financial fraud. They documented Derek's pattern of manipulation, his access to client funds, and his multiple relationships. Sarah also made a difficult decision. She told Emma the wedding was postponed. "But my dress," Emma said, tears forming. "You'll still get to wear it someday," Sarah promised. "Just not this weekend." "Is it because of the thing on the billboard? Did I do something wrong?" Sarah knelt to Emma's level. "You did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and need time to fix them." Thursday evening, Derek arrived for what he believed was their final pre-wedding dinner. Getting nervous, he asked Sarah as they ate takeout Thai food. "A little," Sarah replied truthfully. "Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner will be small. Just my parents, your mom, Jessica, and Emma. Nothing stressful." Sarah nodded. She decided the rehearsal dinner would be the perfect venue for her own revelation. "Derek, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you love me?" Derek looked surprised by the question. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." Derek reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, I'm marrying you in 3 days. Of course I love you. Even with all my problems, the paranoia, the trust issues. Especially because of them. You need someone who understands your struggles." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being so patient." That night, after Derek left, Sarah made final preparations. She printed additional copies of the investigator's evidence. She prepared a brief statement to read at the rehearsal dinner. She packed Emma's clothes for a weekend at Jessica's house. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private room in a downtown restaurant. Derek's parents had driven down from Dallas. Sarah's mother had flown in from Colorado. As they gathered around the table, Derek stood to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he began. "Sarah and I have been through some challenges recently, but we've come out stronger." He looked directly at Sarah. "Love means accepting someone completely, including their flaws and struggles." Sarah's mother dabbed her eyes. Derek's father nodded approvingly. Then Sarah stood. "I'd like to say something too," she announced. Derek smiled encouragingly. "Of course." Sarah pulled out her prepared statement, but then set it aside. Some things needed to be said from the heart. "Derek is right that we've had challenges," she began. "But I've learned something important about love. Real love doesn't require you to doubt your own perceptions. It doesn't make you question your sanity." Derek's smile faltered slightly. "Real love doesn't involve maintaining secret apartments for other women." Sarah continued. The table went completely silent. "Or financial fraud using client escrow accounts." Derek's father leaned forward. "What is she talking about?" "Or coordinating with ex-husbands to build custody cases." Sarah placed the manila envelope on the table. "Derek has been living a double life, multiple relationships, multiple deceptions. And when I discovered the truth, he tried to convince me I was having a mental breakdown." "Sarah," Derek's voice was calm but firm, You're having an episode. Am I because I have photographs, bank statements, and witness testimony that says otherwise? Sarah opened the envelope and spread the photographs across the table. Derek kissing Amber, Derek entering hotels with various women, bank statements showing payments to multiple apartments. Derek's mother gasped. His father's face darkened. These are taken out of context, Derek said. Sarah's been stalking me, hiring investigators. This is exactly the kind of behavior I've been documenting. For your custody case against Emma? Sarah asked. Derek's eyes flashed with anger. The careful mask was slipping. You're an unfit mother, he said coldly. Paranoid, unstable, destructive. Emma deserves better. Emma deserves the truth, Sarah replied, and so does everyone at this table. Derek's father stood up abruptly. Is this real? He demanded, looking at the bank statements. Dad, let me explain. Are you using client funds to pay for apartments for these women? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. You want to know the truth? Yes, I've been seeing other people. Yes, I've been supporting them financially. And yes, Sarah's daughter was never anything more than leverage. The words hit like physical blows. Emma, who had been quietly coloring at the end of the table, looked up with confusion. I never intended to actually marry Sarah, Derek continued, but she was so desperate for stability, so grateful for any attention, and Emma was the perfect hook. Kids make women vulnerable. Sarah's mother stood up, her face pale. You monster! Derek turned to Sarah with a smile that was pure malice. The custody case is already filed, he said. Michael's been very cooperative. Amazing what a little financial incentive can accomplish. Sarah felt the room spinning. What custody case? Emergency hearing Monday morning. Michael's claiming you've become dangerously unstable. The billboard incident, the stalking behavior, the paranoid delusions. I've provided extensive documentation. Derek's father was reading the bank statements with growing horror. Derek, these are client accounts. Emma will be much better off with her father, Derek continued, ignoring his father. And I'll be available to provide stability as a family friend. The calculation was breathtaking. Derek had planned to marry Sarah, gain legal standing in Emma's life, then orchestrate a custody transfer to Michael while maintaining his role as Emma's father figure. You sick fuck, Jessica said, speaking for the first time. Derek shrugged. I prefer thorough. Sarah looked around the table at the shocked faces of her family and friends. Then she looked at Emma, who was beginning to understand that something terrible was happening. Mommy. Emma's voice was small and scared. Sarah knelt beside her daughter's chair. It's going to be okay, baby. We're going home now. As they gathered their things to leave, Derek called after them. Enjoy the weekend, Sarah. It might be your last with Emma for a while. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd revealed his plan in front of witnesses, including his own father, who was now staring at evidence of his son's financial crimes. The real battle was just beginning. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Sarah sat in the courthouse hallway with Jessica, watching lawyers and families navigate their own crises. In 20 minutes, she would face a judge who would decide whether she could keep her daughter. Emma was with Sarah's mother at a nearby coffee shop, unaware that her living situation was being contested. Sarah had spent the weekend explaining that Derek wouldn't be part of their family anymore, but she hadn't mentioned the custody hearing. Remember, Jessica coached, stay calm. Answer directly. Don't let emotion override facts. Michael appeared at the end of the hallway with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman Sarah didn't recognize. Behind them walked Derek, wearing his most respectable suit. He's not even a party to this case, Sarah said. Why is he here? Moral support for Michael, apparently. When they were called into the courtroom, Sarah was surprised by how small and sterile it felt. She'd imagined something more dramatic, but custody hearings were bureaucratic procedures designed to process difficult decisions efficiently. Judge Patricia Valdez reviewed the files as everyone took their seats. This is an emergency hearing regarding the custody of Emma Mitchell, age 8, Judge Valdez began. Mr. Mitchell, you're requesting emergency custody based on claims of parental unfitness. Michael's lawyer stood, Yes, Your Honor. We have documented evidence of Ms. Mitchell's declining mental state and increasingly erratic behavior. Ms. Mitchell, how do you respond? Sarah's lawyer, Amanda Torres, rose. Your Honor, this is a manufactured emergency designed to weaponize Mr. Mitchell's parental rights against his ex-wife. For the next hour, Sarah listened to her life being dissected. Michael's lawyer presented the billboard incident as evidence of public harassment. They showed social media posts where Sarah had questioned Derek's whereabouts, characterizing them as stalking behavior. Derek testified as a character witness, describing Sarah's paranoid episodes and delusional accusations. In my professional opinion, Derek said smoothly, Ms. Mitchell requires intensive mental health intervention. Her daughter has become anxious and withdrawn due to the chaotic home environment. Sarah wanted to scream. Derek's calm, concerned demeanor was exactly the performance that had fooled her for months. Then Amanda Torres began her defense. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that this custody petition is part of a systematic manipulation campaign orchestrated by Mr. Thompson. Derek's confident expression flickered. Amanda presented the private investigator's findings. Derek's multiple relationships, his financial support of various women, his documented pattern of deception. Furthermore, Amanda continued, Mr. Thompson has been using client escrow accounts to fund these relationships, which constitutes financial fraud. Michael's lawyer objected. Mr. Thompson is not party to this custody case. He is when his manipulation of both parents is the underlying cause of this emergency petition. Judge Valdez studied the photographs and bank statements. Mr. Thompson, can you explain these financial records? Derek's composure cracked slightly. I'm not sure why my personal relationships are relevant to this custody matter. They're relevant because you orchestrated this custody petition as retaliation against Ms. Mitchell for discovering your deception. That's completely untrue. Amanda Torres smiled. Your Honor, I have audio recordings from Friday's rehearsal dinner. Sarah hadn't known Jessica was recording, but the audio was damning. Derek's cold admission that he'd never intended to marry Sarah, that Emma was leverage, that the custody case was already filed. I never intended to actually marry Sarah, but she was so desperate for stability, so grateful for any attention, and Emma was the perfect hook. The courtroom was silent as Derek's voice played through the speakers. Judge Valdez looked at Derek with undisguised disgust. Mr. Thompson, did you coordinate with Mr. Mitchell to file this custody petition? Derek was trapped. Lying under oath would be perjury, but admitting the truth would expose his manipulation. I may have discussed my concerns about Emma's welfare with her father, Derek said carefully, including financial incentives for his cooperation. Derek was silent. Judge Valdez turned to Michael. Mr. Mitchell, were you offered financial compensation for filing this petition? Michael looked at his lawyer, then at Derek, then at the floor. I was told my daughter needed protection, he said quietly. That's not what I asked. Michael nodded slowly. Derek said he'd help with my legal fees if I filed for emergency custody. Judge Valdez closed the file folder with a sharp snap. This court finds no evidence of parental unfitness on Ms. Mitchell's part. This petition appears to be a malicious manipulation of our legal system. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. Mr. Mitchell, your emergency petition is denied. Existing custody arrangements remain in place. Derek stood up abruptly. Your Honor, this is a mistake. That child is not safe. Mr. Thompson, you are not a party to this case, and you will remain silent or be held in contempt. Derek's face flushed red, but he sat down. Furthermore, Judge Valdez continued, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential fraud and perjury charges. As they filed out of the courtroom, Derek grabbed Sarah's arm. This isn't over, he said quietly. Jessica immediately stepped between them. Don't touch her. You have no idea what you've started, Derek continued, his voice low and menacing. Actually, I do, Sarah replied. I've ended it. That afternoon, Sarah picked up Emma from school and took her for ice cream. Are you feeling better, Mommy? Emma asked, swinging her legs from the booth. Much better, sweetheart. Good. I didn't like it when you were sad about Derek. Sarah studied her daughter's face. Did Derek ever say anything to you about Mommy being sick? Emma nodded. He said sometimes mommies get confused and need help, but I told him you're not confused. You just think a lot. Sarah smiled, feeling proud of her daughter's intuition. You're right. I do think a lot. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to do. As they walked home, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. The custody hearing was over. Derek's manipulation was exposed. She and Emma were safe. She had no idea that Derek's final revenge was already in motion. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, Sarah thought the worst was behind them. Derek had disappeared from their lives completely. The wedding vendors had been canceled with minimal penalties. Emma was adjusting well to the idea that Derek wouldn't be her stepdad. Sarah was even considering dating again. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. She felt stronger, more confident in her instincts. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything collapsed. Sarah was dropping Emma off at Westfield Academy when the headmaster, Dr. Patricia Winston, approached her car. Ms. Mitchell, could I speak with you privately? Sarah parked and followed Dr. Winston into the administrative building. Emma skipped off to join her classmates, unaware of the tension. I'm afraid we have a serious problem, Dr. Winston began, once they were seated in her office. What kind of problem? Your tuition account is significantly overdue. We've been attempting to contact you for weeks. Sarah blinked in confusion. That's impossible. Derek handles Emma's tuition automatically. Dr. Winston's expression softened. Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Thompson canceled the automatic payment 6 weeks ago. We assumed you'd arranged alternative funding. 6 weeks ago? Sarah's mind raced. That was right after she discovered Derek's affair, but before the custody hearing. The current balance owed is $18,000. If payment isn't received by Friday, Emma will need to be withdrawn from the program. Sarah felt dizzy. $18,000. She didn't have $18,000. Her marketing job covered their basic expenses, but private school tuition was completely beyond her reach. Can we arrange a payment plan? I'm sorry, but school policy requires full payment before re-enrollment. Sarah spent her lunch break calling every financial institution in Austin. Her credit wasn't good enough for an $18,000 personal loan. Her car was too old to use as collateral. Her apartment was rented. That evening, she sat Emma down for a difficult conversation. Sweetie, we need to talk about school. Am I in trouble? No, baby, but we might need to change schools. Back to your old elementary school in the district. Emma's face fell. But all my friends are at Westfield, and my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, she's helping me with my reading. Sarah's heart broke. Emma had thrived at Westfield Academy. The smaller class sizes, the individualized attention, the arts programs. Going back to the overcrowded public school would be devastating for her daughter. It's just temporary, Sarah lied, until Mommy figures some things out. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah called Jessica. Derek planned this, Sarah said. He waited until after the custody hearing, so I couldn't claim it was retaliation. Can you prove the timing was intentional? Not in court, but I know Derek. This is calculated. Sarah spent Wednesday researching public school enrollment procedures. Emma's old school was overcrowded and underfunded. The reading specialist Emma needed wasn't available. The arts programs had been cut due to budget constraints. Thursday morning brought worse news. Sarah arrived at work to find her supervisor, Marcus Chen, waiting in her office. We need to talk, Marcus said, closing the door behind him. Sarah's stomach dropped. About what? The Peterson account. They're requesting a different account manager. Peterson Industries was Sarah's largest client, representing nearly 40% of her annual commissions. Why? What's wrong with my work? Marcus looked uncomfortable. They say there are concerns about your personal life affecting your professional judgment. What concerns, Sarah? That billboard incident made local news. Then there was the courthouse situation with your daughter's custody. Peterson's CEO is very conservative about image issues. Sarah stared at Marcus in disbelief. They're firing me because I exposed my cheating fiancé. They're not firing you. They're just requesting different representation. Which means my commissions drop by 40%? Marcus nodded reluctantly. I'm sorry, Sarah. I tried to convince them otherwise. By Thursday afternoon, Sarah understood the full scope of Derek's revenge. Without the Peterson account, she couldn't afford her apartment rent. Without private school tuition, Emma would lose her educational stability. Without Derek's financial support, they were facing potential homelessness. Derek had systematically removed every safety net he'd provided, leaving Sarah worse off than before she'd met him. That evening, Sarah's phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen. Against her better judgment, she answered, Hello, Sarah. What do you want? To offer you a solution. I hear you're having some financial difficulties. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. Stay away from us. I can reinstate Emma's tuition payments. I can talk to Peterson Industries. Explain that your recent behavior was due to a medical condition that's now being treated. In exchange for what? An apology. Public acknowledgement that you made false accusations against me during a mental health crisis. Sarah closed her eyes. You want me to lie. I want you to admit the truth, that you imagined an affair that never existed, that you created drama where none existed, that you need professional help. And if I don't, then Emma goes to public school, you lose more clients, eventually you lose your apartment, and when you can't provide a stable home for your daughter, the custody situation gets revisited. The threat was clear. Derek was offering to save Sarah from the problems he'd created in exchange for complete capitulation. You have until Friday to decide, Derek said. For Emma's sake, I hope you make the right choice. After he hung up, Sarah sat in her empty apartment and faced the brutal reality of her situation. Derek had outmaneuvered her completely. He'd documented her billboard stunt, her stalking behavior, her paranoid accusations. He'd built a narrative where he was the victim of a disturbed woman's delusions. Now he was offering to rescue her from consequences he'd orchestrated, but only if she validated his version of events. Sarah thought about Emma's excited face on the first day at Westfield Academy. She thought about the cramped, chaotic public school classroom where Emma would struggle without individual attention. She thought about the apartment they'd have to leave, the stability they'd lose, the future Derek was systematically destroying. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah wondered if fighting back had been worth it. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe some truths were too expensive to tell. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected phone call. Sarah was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at Derek's ultimatum deadline, when her phone rang. Ms. Mitchell. This is Helen Thompson, Derek's mother. Sarah was surprised. Helen had seemed shocked at the rehearsal dinner, but hadn't contacted Sarah since. Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry about how everything unfolded. Don't apologize. I'm calling because I need to see you. Today? It's important. 2 hours later, Sarah met Helen at a quiet coffee shop in South Austin. Derek's mother looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance slightly frayed. I found something, Helen said without preamble. Sliding a manila folder across the table, Sarah opened it cautiously. Inside were financial documents, bank statements, and what appeared to be legal correspondence. Derek's been stealing from his clients for over 2 years, Helen said quietly. Not just using escrow accounts for personal expenses, actually stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sarah scanned the documents. The amounts were staggering. Why are you showing me this? Helen's eyes filled with tears. Because Derek's father and I raised a monster, and we didn't see it until Friday night. She pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a text conversation. Derek to Helen. Sarah's going public with lies about me. I need you and Dad to provide character references about her mental instability. Helen to Derek. We will not lie for you. Derek to Helen. Then you'll lose the house. And Dad's retirement fund, guess where that money came from? Sarah looked up sharply. He's been stealing from you too. Helen nodded. Derek has power of attorney over his father's accounts. We discovered yesterday that our retirement savings are gone. He's been using our money to fund his lifestyle and his manipulation schemes. I'm so sorry. There's more. Derek isn't just targeting you. I hired a private investigator after Friday night. There are 3 other women in similar situations, all with children, all being systematically isolated and financially controlled. Helen showed Sarah photographs of Derek with different women in different cities: Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. He's running the same con in multiple locations, playing the devoted boyfriend and stepfather while building control mechanisms. Sarah studied the photos. The women all looked like her. Mid-30s, divorced, vulnerable. One of them is named Jennifer Martinez. She's in Dallas, engaged to Derek, planning a wedding for next month. He's engaged to someone else, while manipulating you and maintaining apartments for at least 2 other women. It's systematic. Helen leaned forward. Sarah, Derek called this morning. He knows you're considering his ultimatum. He's confident you'll capitulate because all the other women have. What do you mean, the woman in Houston, Patricia Williams? Derek convinced her she was mentally unstable after she discovered his cheating. She's now in a psychiatric facility. Voluntary commitment. She signed over custody of her twin boys to their father. Sarah felt sick. And the others. Various forms of surrender. They all believed they were crazy. They all chose Derek's version of reality over their own perceptions. Helen placed a hand over Sarah's. You're the first one who fought back. The first one who documented everything. The first one who didn't break. I'm about to break now, Sarah admitted. He's destroyed everything. Emma's school, my job, our apartment. I don't see how I can keep fighting. That's exactly what he's counting on. Helen pulled out another document. This is a complaint I filed with the State Bar Association this morning. Derek's about to lose his real estate license. She showed Sarah her phone again. And this is a group text I sent to the other women Derek's been manipulating. Sarah read the messages. Jennifer in Dallas was shocked to learn about Derek's other relationships. Patricia's sister was furious to discover Derek's role in her breakdown. The woman in San Antonio was devastated but grateful for the truth. We're all filing complaints, Helen said. Financial fraud, professional misconduct, potential criminal charges, but we need your evidence too. Derek will retaliate against Emma. Derek's going to prison, Helen said firmly. The FBI is investigating his financial crimes. He won't be in a position to retaliate against anyone. Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. What do you need from me? Everything. Your private investigator's evidence, the audio recordings from the rehearsal dinner, documentation of his manipulation tactics. Helen leaned closer. And I need you to call Derek and tell him you're accepting his ultimatum. We need him to believe he's won while we finalize the legal case. You want me to lie to him. I want you to use his own tactics against him. Make him overconfident. Get him to incriminate himself further. Sarah thought about Emma, probably sitting in class at Westfield Academy, unaware that her educational future hung in the balance. If I do this, if I help build this case, can you guarantee Emma won't suffer? Helen smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. Sarah, Derek's father and I have been successful business people for 30 years. We have resources Derek doesn't know about. She slid a check across the table. Emma's tuition through graduation. Consider it an investment in justice. Sarah stared at the check. It was enough to secure Emma's education for the next 10 years. We also spoke with Peterson Industries this morning. Explained that you were the victim of a sophisticated manipulation campaign. They're reinstating your account. Sarah felt tears starting. Why are you doing this? Because Derek is our son, but you and Emma are his victims, and because every woman he's destroyed deserved someone to fight for them. Helen stood to leave. Call Derek this afternoon. Tell him you're ready to make the public apology. Make him believe he's won. Then what? Then we destroy him the same way he destroyed you, systematically, thoroughly, and without mercy. For the first time in weeks, Sarah smiled. Derek thought he'd broken her completely. He was about to discover he'd only made her dangerous. Sarah called Derek at exactly 4 p.m. Friday afternoon, right before his ultimatum deadline. I'll do it, she said without preamble. The public apology. The admission that I imagined everything. Derek's satisfaction was audible through the phone. I knew you'd make the right choice. For Emma's sake. What exactly do you want me to say? Simple. You'll post on social media that you fabricated accusations against me during a mental health crisis. That I was nothing but supportive during your breakdown. That you're seeking professional help. Sarah swallowed her revulsion. And in exchange, Emma's tuition gets reinstated. And I'll call Peterson Industries. Explain that you're recovering well and fully capable of managing their account. When do you want me to post this? Monday morning. That gives you the weekend to craft something believable. After hanging up, Sarah immediately called Helen Thompson. He bought it completely, Sarah reported. He wants me to post the fake apology Monday morning. Perfect. That gives us time to coordinate with the other women. Over the weekend, Sarah worked with Helen, Jessica, and Derek's other victims to prepare their counterattack. They would wait for Sarah's fake apology to go live, then flood social media with the truth. Jennifer Martinez in Dallas had discovered Derek's engagement to Sarah and was furious. Patricia Williams' sister had secured Patricia's release from the psychiatric facility and was documenting Derek's manipulation tactics. The woman in San Antonio had found evidence of Derek's financial fraud in her own relationship. Monday morning. Sarah posted exactly what Derek had demanded. I want to publicly apologize to Derek Thompson for the false accusations I made during a difficult period in my life. Derek was nothing but supportive during my mental health crisis, and I deeply regret the harm my actions caused to his reputation. I am seeking professional help and taking responsibility for my behavior. Derek shared the post within minutes, adding his own comment, "Thank you for your courage, Sarah. Mental health struggles are nothing to be ashamed of. I'm proud of your strength in seeking help." The post generated immediate sympathy for Derek. Comments poured in praising his patience and forgiveness. Then, at exactly noon, the coordinated response began. Jennifer Martinez posted, "This woman is not mentally ill. She's a victim. Derek Thompson is my fiancé too. Same engagement timeline, same manipulation tactics, same lies." Patricia Williams' sister posted, "Derek Thompson convinced my sister she was crazy and had her committed to a psychiatric facility while he stole her money and turned her children against her." The woman in San Antonio posted, "Derek Thompson has been engaged to me for 8 months while apparently engaged to 2 other women. This is not mental illness. This is systematic predation." Helen Thompson posted, "My son Derek Thompson is a sociopath who has been stealing from his clients and his own family to fund multiple relationships and manipulation schemes." Each post included evidence, photographs, bank statements, legal documents, audio recordings. Within an hour, the narrative had completely flipped. Derek went from sympathetic victim to exposed predator. The local news stations picked up the story by evening. Real estate agent accused of running multi-city manipulation scheme. Multiple women claim systematic fraud and abuse by Austin businessman. Sarah watched the coverage from her apartment, Emma safely at Jessica's house for the night. Her phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, other potential victims who had seen the news coverage. Derek called at 11 p.m. "You stupid bitch," he said, his calm facade completely gone. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," Sarah replied. "I've told the truth. I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure you never see Emma again." From prison, good luck with that. Derek was breathing heavily. "You think you've won. You think exposing me changes anything. You're still a broken, desperate woman who fell for an obvious con. Maybe, but I'm a broken, desperate woman who fought back and won." Derek hung up without another word. Tuesday morning brought news that Derek had been arrested. Financial fraud, identity theft, professional misconduct. Bail was set at $500,000. Sarah returned to work to find flowers from Peterson Industries and a message that they were increasing her account responsibilities. Emma's school called to confirm that her tuition was current through graduation. Jessica arrived with champagne and Thai food. "How does it feel to be vindicated?" Jessica asked as they celebrated. Sarah considered the question. "Exhausting, but right." "Any regrets about the billboard?" Sarah laughed. "The billboard was amateur hour compared to this. I learned that sometimes you have to fight fire with wildfire." 6 months later, Derek was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Sarah had testified at his sentencing hearing, along with 5 other women who had come forward. The judge called Derek's crimes a systematic campaign of psychological and financial abuse designed to exploit vulnerable women and children. Sarah used her portion of the restitution settlement to start a nonprofit organization helping women document and escape manipulation relationships. Emma thrived at Westfield Academy and frequently asked if she could help with her mother's work helping other mommies. On the 1-year anniversary of the billboard incident, Sarah drove past the I-35 and Riverside intersection where it had all started. The digital display was showing an advertisement for her nonprofit, "Trust Your Instincts. You're not crazy. You're not alone." Sarah smiled and kept driving. She had learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's construction, building something better from the wreckage of what someone tried to destroy. Derek had taught her that she was stronger than she knew, and now she was teaching other women the same lesson. The billboard had been just the beginning.